Welcome Internet to a psychoanalytic cogitation, and today we're gonna be much less serious than usual, and we're gonna be analyzing the video game Among Us and why it blew up in popularity during the pandemic. So first and foremost, let me just lay the ground for this. I'm not going to be very preoccupied by numbers or statistics or any of that stuff, which is objectively very interesting, but it's not my forte. I'm more going to try and take an interesting psychoanalytic spin and on why that game blew up massively during the pandemic and try and find the unconscious roots. I'm not saying that I'm right. This is merely just a cogitation, meaning just me thinking about it. But it's a topic that I just found so interesting, and I've been thinking about it for years. So I just wanted to preface this is not one of those explicit pieces, but I just wanted to talk about it. So in the end, why not? So after this long and boring introduction, let's get to it. So I believe everyone knows the game Among Us. It's a kind of werewolf villagers game where basically there is an intruder, monster among the crew, and the crew must find out who before the monster kills them all. So you vote at points for the monster, and if you're wrong, you kill an innocent, but if you're right, you win the game as the crew. The goal of the monster is to kill the whole of the crew. So that's basically the premise of Among Us. And to my interest, it was virtually unknown until the pandemic, until we were all locked in, and then it sparked. So objectively speaking, it's because some streamers streamed it and there was a snowball effect, but unconsciously I think it sent us something else. That was a way of playing a bit of what was happening, because if you remember correctly, the first variations of the corona were in some cases asymptomatic, meaning that you could have it but you would not know, and you'd still be contaminating people and hurting people, of course unconsciously and not knowing, of course, and not even unconsciously but just unknowingly. And I think that this game was kind of the perfect setup of a replay of what was happening to us. We were blocked the characters are blocked in a spaceship and we were blocked at home, and any interaction was potentially dangerous. That your neighbor, the people you love, could secretly or covertly be having an illness, something that could hurt us, something that was bad or evil in a way. And of course, Among Us, it's a monster and it seeks to destroy, so it's much more overt, it's much more paranoid. But if you think about it, it blew up because you could never know who was necessarily asymptomatic, meaning the threat was always there. And I think something about collective unconscious, not in the Jungian sense, but our unconsciouses, latched onto that. It was a way of playing with something that was deeply unsettling and terrifying, that everyone at the core could be a danger, a threat, and all the badness could be inside of someone, and that badness would be spreading and killing. And that's, I think, something that was the catalyst of such a success. And of course, it's a fun game. I'm not saying it's purely unconscious reasons, right? I'm not saying that at all. But I really believe that through this game, we were able to experience and play with something frightening, that others can hurt us. Others, even unknowingly, could be the reasons of our collective downfall. And that was the epitome of that phenomena. And of course, it was also a way of being in a relationship, because everyone was playing that game basically at the time, and people were still having relationships. And there was, of course, a couple of good games here and there, and of course I played it, just for you to know. But at the core, it was always about that, the threat, the danger, and yet the necessity of being with others. Among Us was the complete, I feel, representation of what was happening. Everyone was in a confined space and you couldn't really trust people. Even though there were masks and stuff like that, there was a fundamental, maybe there's the virus, maybe not, kind of aspect to it. And if there is a virus, if the person knows and hides the symptoms or has mild symptoms, how do we know if they have it or not? That was even before the tests, so there's no way of fully knowing. And also, you did not know if you had the COVID or if you had another virus, which meant that basically everyone was confused and there was a lot of anxiety. And I think that a way also of our minds to try and deal with anxiety is also to transform it into a game, a play, a bit like how children sometimes play out stuff that makes them anxious. We were playing out the COVID pandemic in Among Us. And I know it might seem very far-fetched, but here I'm really talking about the unconscious mind, right? It's not necessarily something that we consciously think of, like, yes, I'm going to defeat or prevent my anxiety bound by COVID by playing a video game, because of course not. It doesn't work like that. It's more like something at the back ends of our minds that connects with something, and we're not even fully aware of it. But I found it so interesting. Like, I was just like completely enthralled with Among Us at that time, and I really felt it incredible that everyone was like playing it. Like, even people that weren't playing video games were still playing it. And that aspect, I feel, was very, very interesting. And it also created, in a way, a little community of people. That it was both trying to find the bad among others, right? Or not among us, like the group, as basically trying to find who's the threat, in real life, really, and trying to, in a way, isolate them or throw them out. Because the whole point of Among Us was to eject into space the bad one. Of course, we didn't do that with people with COVID, obviously, or we treated them much more humanely. But the idea was to throw out the bad. And here, when I mean the bad, I mean the Kleinian bad object, right? The one that's going to destroy, hurt, break, care, to destroy, on the surface caring but being destructive at the core. That's what I mean. And that ejection is basically what everyone wanted to do with the bad that could reside with any of us. And that for groups is always incredibly complicated, that badness that there is. So there's a projection element and a projective element. And in the game, it was like, the rules of the game was that there was one bad element, right? The bad that collectively represented all the bad, all the covert symptoms, all the nastiness, all the death potential, and they were sent into space, ejected if you found them, and if not, then you lost. And that game, I think, really hit the nail on the head of our unconscious fears of being destroyed by something covert, something insidious. And I think that game nailed it perfectly. A bit like Aliens, if you've seen the movie, kind of the same gist. But we were not playing as Ripley, right? Here we were playing, every single one of us. And those debates also, both so many conscious and unconscious elements of, I saw him, so much projection, so many mechanisms were just out there, lying in the open. And if you've ever played a game of Among Us, you know how fundamentally unconscious all of this was. I mean, we were projecting, we were undergoing projective identification, all that in a fun way, in a way that was, in a way, non-threatening. We were able to transform it through the game, our collective fears and anxieties. And that's what I found so great about that brief period where we were all locked down, and yet that game just skyrocketed on the charts. And of course, this is a very, very psychoanalytic position. Not everyone's going to agree, and nor should you if you don't agree, and that's fine. But I just wanted to talk about it because that's something I had in my mind for years. And I felt to myself, yeah, maybe now is the right time to talk about it and to start maybe a conversation. So, as always, if you found the topic interesting, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.